guys, welcome back to a case of econ struggles. Welcome to another Sunday Stata tip. Today we're going to start working through an example project over the next couple of Sunday Stata tip videos. The point of doing so is that we have seen a lot of technical skills in Stata, but I want to take those skills and apply them to a data analysis project. So we're going to go ahead and go through the various stages of a data analysis project over the course of these videos. As you might expect, we've got a question we want to answer and we've got some data. So let's start by going over the question we want to answer. The question we want to answer is really two parts, but both relate to facial covering policies across the world and their impacts on COVID-19. The first and the main question we want to get at is whether or not stricter facial covering policies or stricter mask mandates positively impact or reduce the number of COVID-19 infections and deaths. The second question we want to get at is whether or not countries with a stricter mask mandate tend to have higher rates of vaccinations within those countries. I've collected 3 data sets that we're going to use over the course of this project. The first is about face covering policies or mask mandates across the country across time. So I've got country day level data, where on each day for each country, this data assigns a score between 0 and 4, where 0 is no mask mandate and a 4 is a very strict mask mandate or facial covering policy. The second data set we've got is from the WHO that covers infections and deaths from COVID-19 for each country on a given day. And then the third data set that I have is vaccination data, which, as you might expect, covers the number of vaccinations in a country in a given day. Now, even though we have not built the data, we definitely want to start thinking about the analyses we want to use. The reason we want to think about that is when we're building the data, if we sort of know what kind of analyses we want to run later, we can try to include those variables or that information that we might need later when we're building the data. There are 2 main benefits to thinking about this analysis before we build the data. The first is that if we're looking through the data and we don't see the sort of information we might need to run a certain chart, we can think about an alternative chart or analysis that we can run instead. The second is that if we can include all the information we need for those charts now, we won't have to come back to the data and rebuild it if we're trying to make a chart later on. Now, with smaller data, it's not that big of a deal. It doesn't take that long to rerun. But if you've got any sort of big data you're working with, it could take a long time. And that time that you need to go back and rebuild the data could be used to do other things like do the write-up or think about other charts that you could run. When I think about analyses, I don't want to just think about regressions. They're easy to run in Stata, but not everyone can understand regressions right away. And what we're trying to do with these charts is we're trying to tell a story. We're trying to tell a story about COVID-19 infections and deaths and facial mask policies that anyone can understand, not just economists. So let's think about some sort of questions that we could answer with some other types of charts. So for example, I might want to know, well, of all the countries in the world, what is the strongest level of a mask mandate they reached? So I might take each country and assign them a maximum score and put it in a pie chart and see kind of the global breakdown of facial mask policies. I might also think about, well, don't countries tend to change their facial mask policies over time? Might be useful to show a couple of examples of that and maybe compare it to that country's infections and deaths over time. Finally, we might get more towards what we're trying to answer. We might show a couple of countries, their infections and deaths over time, as well as their score. We might also try to compare deaths and infections over time between countries with, say, a 0 and 1 per mask mandate or no mask mandate to countries with a 3 or 4 with a higher mask mandate. Again, we're trying to tell the story without regressions. These are some ways we can do it, and we'll go over these in more detail in future videos. I've slotted in some basic regressions. We don't have a ton of data. We're probably not going to get causality out of this data. We can still use correlational analysis or these regressions to see what sort of effect a stricter mask mandate might have on COVID deaths or infections. We can think about how vaccinations play a role. We can add in things like GDP, and that'll sort of conclude the analysis. Just to lay out a little bit of how the rest of these Sunday Stata tip videos are going to go for this example project, just to the overview. Next time we'll build the data, and then we're going to start going into charts. The charts I'm going to make in Stata and Excel, and we'll go over formatting and exporting that data from Stata into Excel to make those charts. Then we'll make those regressions, and at the end we are going to put them all into a PowerPoint and really see how this story unfolds and how we can tell the story without words, just with charts. So if you would like to follow along for this project over the next couple of weeks, make sure to like and subscribe. Otherwise, we will see you next time for another case of econ struggles.